So, good evening, everyone. So, first of all, thank you to the organizers for having me here. It's a great pleasure to be a part of this speaking forum. So, I'm Ravi Arora here, and I'm responsible for the regional sales of HVDC in ABB for the South Asia Pacific region. And here today we talk about the interconnections. So just to give an idea that what's the outlook of the grid which we could see for the future. So we all know that power sector is going through the transformation, and one of the major transformation which is happening is on the power generation front, where most of this conventional power generation is getting converted to the renewable power. So we soon would be having a world where we satisfy all our energy needs, the power needs, from 100% of renewable energy. And this renewable energy will mainly be coming from the wind or solar. So when we have this vision of satisfying our needs through 100% of RE, this has a direct impact on the grid. And what is this impact? It's mainly because of the two factors. The regional, the RE would be in clusters, which could be on the offshore seaside, offshore wind, or it could be large solar power in the deserts. So it will be away from the existing grid. So the first part is that the need to be connected to the existing grid. And the second part is coming mainly because of the nature of RE itself. RE is intermittent, as we know, so there would be a need of balance in the whole grid, and then the whole grid needs to be changed to get this balance of load and generation of 100% RE. From interconnection point of view, when we see here, it's not something where we are discovering it for the first time. Interconnections, large bulk power, long distance were already there even in 80s and 90s. We had special purpose HVDC links which were connected with large fossil fuel. Even in India, Rihand Dadri was one of the first one which brought thermal power to a place near Delhi. And then we have large interconnections like NEA project, which bring large bulk 6,000 megawatt of hydro from northeast in India to somewhere in the northern region, almost 1,700 kilometers away. So they were always there. But today, because of these changes, we also have now cross-country power exchanges coming into the picture. RE is one pressure, power trading is other, optimized pricing of the power are the other factors. So it's all happening. Now, when we have 100% RE, we also think that in the next 10 to 20 years, we will move towards a grid which could control all this, and which would be probably in the form of meshed DC grids and super grids. Which we talked a little bit in our earlier discussions, but that's something which could happen next. If you see the other key drivers other than the renewable energy, we talked about in the earlier discussion, so I don't go into details of that, but there will be some compelling key driving factors which drive interconnections, and they include optimized power development, power system planning, and another simple case where a customer who probably could be, let's say, in Sri Lanka, they need not invest in the power generation side, so there won't be any capital investment. They don't need to set up any thermal power plant or hydro power plant or even renewable power plant. Assume for a while there are interconnections available from India to Sri Lanka. They can directly buy power. So no need to spend in capital investment, just buy the power and then invest it in your industrial progress. So all those things are the key factors which could drive cross-country exchanges and enlarging the grids. Of course, there are some key issues which are there with the interconnections. Some of them we talked about here. So there are main technical issues which I talk about here. One is the low utilization of the interconnection when it is connected with a large RE power. So we all know that renewable energy, when we produce it, is not available for 24 hours. So it's not like thermal. So if the interconnection is only connected with RE and bringing this large power to some load center, it will be utilized not to the full extent. So maybe for solar power factor, where the CUF in a solar power plant is low, 20%, so line utilization will be only 20%. And in the wind case, it could be higher. In offshore wind, it would still be higher. But it won't be fully utilized. And when we convert this non-utilization of the line cost into the energy cost will look higher compared to what if it would have been connected to a thermal power plant. So that becomes the issue with, for designing the interconnectors only for the renewable power. But we will discuss about the solutions. There could be solutions available to this and the technology which is helping us here in a short time. Another issue which is connected with this interconnection is the storage, temporal storage versus spatial storage. So temporal storage is basically about the storage which we have in the form of electrical batteries or pump storage, and this is storage for the time. So for example, if we consider India as a region, and if we have 100% RE available here, we still can have full 24-hour power from RE if we produce it during the day and store it for the night. And that will require a lot of batteries and a lot of pump storage, but we still could do this without interconnecting to other regions which bring power from, for the night time. So that is the storage with time. But there could be a spatial storage as we discussed in the interconnections. So if we have a connection, let's say with Middle East or Oman, we still could have the peaking power satisfied in India from the solar power, which could be at 6 o'clock in the local Middle East region. So that is the space storage, which comes through the interconnections. So there's as a first look, there would be a conflict that which storage is cheaper and which storage is better. So one would tend to have a local storage and satisfy the needs. And there could be another look to satisfy this through the interconnections. We made a study where we have this grid which is supplied 100% by RE, solar plus wind. And in this load curve and demand curve, we will have some areas where when the generation is more and load is less and vice versa. So here are the two scenarios where you can use transmission lines to store it, or you can use battery to flatten it. The result of this study is that both would be needed. In an interconnected world, both actually are not competitors. They may look like a competition, but actually they complement each other. And when we design the interconnections for feasibility, what we were discussing some time back, if we bring the pump storage or the cheaper storage also in these interconnections, so the best combination which makes sense is to have 100% power from the renewable generation, couple it with the interconnectors, and then supplement it with the cheap storage. And that gives the total solution for the global energy needs. So these are the enablers for the interconnectors, which is the coexistence as I was discussing with the temporal storage. And we have some projects in Australia, interconnections coming, which link Tasmania to the mainland Australia, which actually mix all these three. They are interconnections. They use, again, costly cables. Cables are costly even in Australia and Tasmania link as they are in Lanka and India link and Oman and India link. But somehow they have made the feasibility out of this. So it's a 350-kilometer cable involved for a 1,500 megawatt project, but still is feasible there. And this feasibility is coming out of combining all these factors which give more benefits than the cost is. The second solution here could be a phase-wise development where the government support would be needed. And this would basically means that assuming a project like Leh, which is, let's say, 2,000 megawatt solar project in north of India, and we want to bring this power to a region like Delhi. So here, we will have to design the interconnection connection first for the megawatt rating of the solar plant itself. For example, if we are setting up a 3,000 megawatt solar plant there, we will have to make a interconnection of 3,000 megawatt only, and that's the best optimized at this stage. But in feasibility, it will look like very underutilized, and the energy cost will come out to be high. But suppose if we make this, and this operates at, let's say, 20-25% CUF, then we have the potential of adding other 3,000 megawatt solar with battery storage, and that uses the line at some other point of time, and we can do this at least for 3 to 4 times. So for the next 3 to 4 times solar addition, which would be, let's say, 10,000 megawatt in that region, we won't be needing any interconnection, and that would be very, very cheap. And when we see the final completed cost of 100% utilized interconnection with 10 gigawatt of solar here, but the interconnector megawatt suiting to the first phase size, it would be very, very cheap, and it's very feasible. And this is how such kind of interconnectors across the country or within the large countries could be built up. One very important element of the interconnection is the technology. Since it has been happening over the years, from technology point of view today, to interconnect the world is not a problem. The technology is available. We have to see the technology suiting to a particular interconnections based on the values of power and voltage which are there, and the country frequency. So the first option normally is AC, and then we compare with DC, and then we can see which one is better. And when we choose DC, today we have another technology which is called voltage source conversion compared to the LCC which was used, which has much more advantages of interconnecting grid and making it much stable and reliable. So we discussed that. We see that just for a glance where AC and DC comparison is. This is a typical diagram where we see the first interconnection test, whether it should be AC or DC. So the total formula would be the capital cost of the transmission line or cable, plus the capital cost of the terminals, which could be substations or HVDC, and the losses which would be there. Incidentally, in HVDC, the losses in the line would be much lower compared to the AC one. So when you put all these values in this formula, we will get a break-even distance for that particular interconnections. So today, with all the things which we have, if we have an overhead line, this break-even distance would typically be in the range of 400 kilometers. So if we are to connect two places with interconnections which are 400 kilometers apart by an overhead line, we should start thinking of AC and then of DC, HVDC, and we should evaluate which one would be better. And if it uses a cable like India with Oman, or maybe with some other countries where the deep sea is there, the cable break-even distance for HVDC is very low. It's only 80 kilometers because of the cable nature. It cannot carry capacitance and AC power. So the break-even distance is only 80 kilometers. So if we are to connect two places with an interconnector, high megawatt, we can think of DC if the distance is even 80 kilometers. So these are the first triggers, and of course there would be some technical benefits which little bit we talked about in the earlier speakers' discussion. There would be technical benefits like controllability of power or asynchronous nature, and many others which could come there from the environmental point of view. From environmental point of view, if you see, in an interconnector, if we want to transmit 8,000 megawatt of power from one place to other, if we use AC, we would be using roughly around 300 meters of right of way for those 1,000 kilometers or 1,500 kilometers or 2,000 kilometers. Distance is not a constraint for DC. And if we use DC 800 kV to transmit same power, 8,000 megawatt, we require only 60 meter corridor. So it's only 1/5 of the right of way, and it's a big benefit for the environment. Just to have a look what the interconnections are there over the world. Now we talk of more HVDC because the nature of the interconnections is very close to HVDC. The HVDC is happening at a very fast rate. In 2005, there were roughly around 50,000 megawatt of HVDC in the world. Today is more than 200,000. So it's 4x in 15 years. And it's a growth rate which is 3 times of the global world GDP. Incidentally, 70% of this is done by ABB. And we have the largest interconnection in the world now. The transmission line, 3,200 kilometer long in China, which transmits 12,000 megawatt in a single line from one place to other at a voltage of plus minus 1100 kV. And this is Europe, where a lot of interconnections are happening. As we can see, it would be almost like a European grid in 10 years' time. And it's again Europe, where the blue ones are the active projects. Some key figures here. These are some of the examples for interconnectors which we discussed. This is a slide which shows that what can be the megawatt of one interconnector. So we go to 14 gigawatt here on the extreme side, where it is possible to transmit 14 gigawatt within one transmission line, having very low right of way. And on the lower side, we could plan solar plants or offshore wind plants like 2000 megawatt, very optimized size, and connect them with the grid. VSC is a new technology of HVDC, which is scoring over and is in complement with the renewable energy that's happening. Both of them are helping each other in technology as well as in the growth. VSC has an additional benefit in HVDC, wherein it can connect with a passive load on one side and active on the other. So which basically means that it can connect offshore grid, which has no grid on the other side, and it can connect places like Leh, which have no grid on the other side. So that's the best benefit of bringing renewable energy from anywhere to the grid using this technology. Other features include 100% reversal of power within no time. And it is capable of forming a DC grid, this technology, because you don't have to reverse the current when you reverse the power. Or you can reverse the current, but you don't have to change the voltage polarity when you change the power here. This is a typical diagram of HVDC connection, which we could see either from Oman to India or from any place to any place using cable, or a bigger one using the transmission line. Here we will have a big solar plant which is connected through inverters and transformers at 66 kV level. The power will be pooled at 66 kV level, and then it's connected to the HVDC transformer, which connected with the HVDC voltage. And then HVDC comes into the picture, and it will take the whole power to the other recipient station in a manner that it would look as good as a generating plant at the load center. This is one example of this Australia interconnections which we talked about, where they have found the feasibility. It's around 350 kilometers of cable here from Tasmania to Australia, and it carries 1500 megawatt of power, and is something which makes use of all the things which we are talking about. This is one of the largest interconnections probably which is in the discussions today, and this will bring a lot of solar power from Australia. Australia has a lot of potential for the solar power, right up to the Singapore, where they can afford to buy this power. So this is one of the largest project which has sea cable of 4,000 kilometers. It's very costly project, is very technically also very challenging project, but technically it's feasible. And Singapore is the region where the people are thinking of buying this kind of clean power. That is the stress which they have on the clean power. So if this project can get success, I think any interconnection in the world would get success. And this is how the total picture would look like all over the globe with the interconnections. There would be a need of connecting different regions to feed the world with 100% of renewable energy, only solar, only wind, and these kind of interconnections. Thank you.